The dust of the high plains clung to him like a second skin, each grain a whisper of the judgment back home. They called his brother a coward, a deserter, the kind of shame that etched itself onto a family name like a brand on a hide. Caleb felt it deep in his gut, a constant ache, a knot of resentment and a fierce, burning need to wipe the slate clean. Then the saddle reappeared, a ghost from a past he'd tried to bury, bringing with it a chill that had nothing to do with the setting sun, and everything to do with a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to face. The scent of dry earth and pine needles usually brought Caleb a sense of peace, a quiet calm that settled deep in his bones. Not today. Today, the familiar scent of his small ranch, nestled against the foothills of the dusty Rockies, felt tainted. He was mending a fence, the rhythmic clang of hammer on nail a poor attempt to drown out the gnawing unease in his gut. For 2 years, the whispers had followed him like flies on a summer's day. Your brother Silas? The one who ran? Each word a fresh wound. Silas, who vanished without a trace from his cavalry unit, leaving only a stain on the family name that Caleb had desperately, futilely tried to scrub clean. His only company was Rusty, a scruffy, loyal terrier mix, who lay curled in the meager shade of a gnarled juniper, one ear cocked, sensing Caleb's mood. Suddenly, Rusty's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Caleb straightened, his hand instinctively going to the worn holster at his hip. A lone rider was approaching, kicking up a plume of dust against the stark blue sky. As the rider drew closer, Caleb's breath hitched. Slung over the horse's back, unmistakable even from a distance, was Silas's saddle. The same saddle Silas had ridden off on, the one Caleb had meticulously cared for, polishing the leather until it gleamed, before Silas had joined up. It was old, scarred, and familiar in a way that twisted Caleb's stomach. The rider, a grizzled old prospector named Jedediah, dismounted slowly, his weathered face grim. He didn't say a word, just led the horse forward, the saddle a morbid trophy. Jedediah reached into one of the saddlebags and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. He handed it to Caleb, his eyes holding a mixture of pity and something else, something unreadable. Caleb's fingers trembled as he unfolded the note. The handwriting was cramped, almost illegible, but one word jumped out, stark and undeniable: coward. Beneath it, a crude map, leading to a desolate stretch of badlands known as the Devil's Gulch. A cold dread seeped into Caleb's chest, turning his blood to ice. This wasn't just a note. It was a challenge, a taunt. Silas's saddle, a symbol of his supposed desertion, had returned, demanding an answer. The calm, observant instinct that usually guided Caleb warred with a sudden surge of raw fury. He wanted to lash out, to deny, to scream into the vast emptiness of the plains. But he held it in, clenching his jaw, his eyes narrowed, studying the crude map. Devil's Gulch. A place whispered about in hushed tones, a graveyard of lost souls and forgotten dreams. Going there meant facing not only the truth about Silas, but also the dangerous realities of a land that cared nothing for human sorrow. He looked at the saddle, then at the map. There was no choice. He had to go. The journey to Devil's Gulch was a testament to the land's indifference. The sparse trails turned into jagged, sun-baked ravines, each twist and turn a further test of Caleb's resolve. The note, tucked securely in his saddlebag, felt like a burning coal against his leg. He rode for days, the silence broken only by the creak of leather and the distant cry of a hawk. The initial fury had settled into a grim determination, but a new, unsettling feeling had begun to worm its way into his thoughts. Dread. What if the truth was worse than the rumors? What if Silas truly was a coward? One sweltering afternoon, as Caleb navigated a treacherous pass, a rider appeared on the horizon, moving with an unnerving swiftness. Caleb instinctively reached for his pistol, his eyes scanning the sparse landscape for cover. The rider, a lean, dark-haired man in a dust-coated duster, pulled up sharply, his horse kicking up a cloud of red dirt. He dismounted, his movements fluid and precise, a rifle cradled casually in his arm. "Heard tell you're looking for a ghost," the man said, his voice low and raspy like gravel rolling down a slope. His eyes, cold and sharp, took Caleb in with a single appraising glance. "Silas, ain't it? The one who ran?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" "Name's Vance, and I know things. Things about your brother. Things that ain't for polite company." Vance's gaze lingered on Caleb's saddle, then drifted to the horizon. "That note of yours, it ain't just a map, it's a bait. And you, friend, you took it." A wave of unease washed over Caleb. Vance's words, though cryptic, carried a weight that made the hairs on Caleb's neck stand up. "What are you talking about?" Vance took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "There are folks who don't want old stories dug up. Especially not stories about how some men got rich off the backs of others' misfortunes. Silas, he knew things. Things that could get a man killed. Or branded a coward, if you're lucky." He paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air. "You're walking into a hornet's nest, cowboy. And you're walking alone." Caleb felt a cold dread settle in. Vance wasn't just a stranger. He was a warning and a threat. The casual way Vance held his rifle, the veiled menace in his voice. It was clear this wasn't a friendly conversation. "What do you want?" Caleb asked, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Vance smirked, a flicker of something cruel in his eyes. "Information, and maybe, to make sure you don't stir up too much dust. Folks around here like their secrets buried deep." He took another step back, his gaze unwavering. "You keep pushing. You'll find out the hard way that some truths are better left undisturbed." With that, Vance swung himself back onto his horse, the rifle still in his grip. He gave Caleb one last chilling look, then spurred his horse, disappearing as quickly as he'd appeared. Caleb stood there, the dust settling around him, the silence suddenly heavy with unspoken threats. Vance knew about the note, about Silas, and he seemed to be part of something far more sinister than just the simple shame of a deserting brother. The challenge had indeed escalated. Caleb had lost more than just time on this journey. He'd lost the comforting illusion that this was a private quest, a simple family matter. He was now a player in a dangerous game, and he had just lost the element of surprise. The landscape shifted, the familiar dusty plains giving way to a jagged, desolate expanse of rock formations and sun-baked earth. This was the Badlands, a place where the wind howled like a banshee and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. As Caleb rode deeper into the Devil's Gulch, a memory, sharp and vivid, cut through the present. He was a boy again, no older than 10, perched on a fence post watching Silas, barely a man himself, break a wild Mustang. Silas, all lean muscle and quiet confidence, had whispered promises of adventure, of riding the range together, of facing down any challenge. "We're a team, Caleb," he'd said, his eyes bright with a future they both believed in. Always. That promise, whispered under the vast, star-dusted sky, echoed in Caleb's mind, a painful counterpoint to the word coward scrawled on the note. The bitterness of that memory, of a bond broken and a future shattered, churned inside him. He'd always admired Silas, looked up to him. When Silas joined the cavalry, Caleb had swelled with pride. Then had come the news, cold and impersonal, of his desertion. The pride had curdled into a mix of shame and a raw, confusing anger. Now, riding through this harsh, unforgiving land, those emotions, long suppressed, began to surface. A deep ache of betrayal, a lingering tenderness for the brother he'd lost, and a burning resentment for the lie that had become his life. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of sagebrush and the metallic tang of something else, something akin to fear. He spotted a cluster of ramshackle buildings in the distance, little more than a ghost town clinging to the edge of a canyon. This must be the place marked on the map, a forgotten outpost. As he approached, a lone figure emerged from one of the crumbling shacks. A woman, her face etched with lines of hardship, her eyes wide with a mix of suspicion and resignation. She looked at him, then at his horse, her gaze lingering on Silas's saddle. "Another one come to poke around the bones?" she croaked, her voice raspy, like dry leaves. "This place ain't got no good left in it. Only what folks left behind." Caleb dismounted, his hand still resting on his pistol. "I'm looking for answers. About Silas, my brother." The woman's eyes flickered, a flicker of something akin to pity. Silas. He was a good man. Not like they said. Not like the others. She gestured vaguely towards the canyon. They forced his hand. Took his choice. Said he was a coward, but he was anything but. Her words were a jolt, a crack in the hardened shell of Caleb's beliefs. Vance's warning, the woman's cryptic words. It was all beginning to coalesce into a terrifying new picture. Silas wasn't a coward. He was a victim. But a victim of what? And who were they? Caleb was at a crossroads. The logical path was to turn back, to leave this dangerous place and the ugly truths it held. But his heart, fueled by a renewed sense of loyalty and a fierce desire to right a terrible wrong, pulled him forward. To abandon this quest now would be to abandon Silas all over again. He looked at the dust-choked path leading deeper into the ghost town, then back at the stark, empty horizon. He chose to follow his heart, no matter the cost. The ghost town was aptly named. Wind whistled through splintered timbers, and dust devils danced in the empty streets, mimicking the restless spirits of those who'd found their end here. As Caleb moved deeper into the desolate settlement, the tension grew almost palpable. Every shadow seemed to conceal a watcher, every creak of wood a prelude to danger. He pushed open the sagging door of what looked like an old saloon, its interior choked with dust and forgotten memories. Inside, two figures were waiting. One was Vance, leaning against the bar, his rifle still in his hands, a chillingly smug expression on his face. The other was a man Caleb recognized from wanted posters. Bart the Butcher Ramsey, a notorious outlaw with a cruel reputation and a cold, predatory gaze. Ramsey, a hulking figure with a scarred face, was cleaning a wicked-looking bowie knife, his eyes fixed on Caleb. Well, Ramsey sneered, his voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "The little brother comes to finish what the coward started." Caleb's blood ran cold. This was it. The confrontation he'd been dreading. "What did you do to Silas?" he demanded, his hand hovering over his pistol. Ramsey chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. He saw too much, knew too much. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's all. Had to make an example of him. Make sure no one else got any bright ideas about speaking out. He gestured with the knife. "The cavalry called him a deserter. We just helped them with the paperwork, so to speak." Vance stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. "He had a choice, your brother. Follow orders or disappear. He chose poorly." Caleb's mind reeled. Silas hadn't deserted. He'd been silenced. The shame, the anger, the confusion that had plagued him for years suddenly coalesced into a singular, white-hot rage. "You framed him," Caleb snarled, drawing his pistol in one fluid motion. Ramsey's eyes narrowed. "Fool, you think you can walk in here and challenge us?" He lunged forward, the bowie knife glinting in the dim light. Vance raised his rifle, but Caleb was quicker. A shot echoed through the saloon as Caleb fired, the bullet striking Ramsey in the shoulder. The outlaw staggered back with a roar of pain, dropping his knife. Vance fired, the shot tearing into the wall beside Caleb's head. Caleb dove for cover behind an overturned table, splinters flying. The saloon became a maelstrom of gunfire and shouting. Caleb fired, aiming for Vance, but the outlaw was too fast, dodging behind the bar. Ramsey, clutching his wounded shoulder, snarled curses. Everything seemed lost. Caleb was outmanned, outgunned, and wounded. A bullet grazed his arm, a searing pain blooming across his skin. He felt a wave of despair, the years of pain and the weight of his brother's reputation crashing down on him. This was the end. He wouldn't clear Silas's name. He would just join him in oblivion. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside. The front door burst open, and a figure stood silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. It was Jedediah, the old prospector, holding a battered shotgun. He didn't hesitate. Without a word, he raised the shotgun and fired, the blast tearing through the saloon. Vance screamed, his rifle clattering to the floor as he collapsed. Ramsey, seeing his accomplice fall, looked around wildly, then bolted out the back door, disappearing into the maze of crumbling buildings. Caleb, bleeding and breathless, looked at Jedediah, a wave of shock and relief washing over him. The old man, who'd brought him Silas's saddle, had now unexpectedly saved his life. The tables had turned and the hunt for the truth was far from over. The confrontation had left Caleb battered, both physically and emotionally. The bullet wound in his arm throbbed, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to joining Silas in the grave. Jedediah, surprisingly nimble for his age, had applied a makeshift bandage, his eyes holding a quiet understanding. The immediate threat had passed, but the silence that followed was thick with unspoken questions. The old saloon, now riddled with bullet holes, felt like a tomb. Caleb sat on an overturned whiskey barrel, the weight of the past few days pressing down on him. Even with Jedediah's unexpected intervention, the loneliness of his quest was a palpable thing. He was a solitary figure, driven by a ghost, fighting shadows that seemed to multiply with every step he took. He thought of all the years he'd carried the burden of Silas's supposed cowardice, the cold judgment of the townsfolk, the quiet whispers that followed him everywhere. Now, the truth, brutal and unforgiving, was laid bare. Silas wasn't a coward. He was a victim, and Caleb had been blind. Jedediah, ever silent, handed him a canteen. Caleb drank deeply, the cool water a stark contrast to the burning in his gut. The old man then pointed to a small, almost imperceptible mark on the ground beneath the shattered remains of the bar, a faint, almost erased symbol. It was the same symbol etched into the underside of Silas's saddle, a detail Caleb had never truly noticed until now. A strange, twisted heart with a broken arrow through it. "This here," Jedediah rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "This is a mark of a secret society. Powerful men. They use places like this to do their dirty work. And they ain't above using a man's reputation to cover their tracks. The saddle, the note, the symbol. It all clicked into place. The saddle, which had brought him to this desolate place, now held a new, sinister meaning. It wasn't just Silas's. It was his sign, a silent testament to a hidden war, a war Silas had been caught in. This was more than just clearing his brother's name. It was about exposing a deeper corruption. A choice lay before him, stark and clear. He could leave now, his arm throbbing, his heart heavy, and let the secrets of Devil's Gulch remain buried. He had found the truth about Silas, after all. Or he could pursue this, risk everything to bring these men to justice, to truly honor his brother's memory. It was a chance, a dangerous one, but it was a chance to finally lay the ghost of the past to rest. He looked at the symbolic heart, then out to the vast, unforgiving landscape. He took a deep breath, his decision made. He would follow the trail, no matter how dangerous, no matter the cost. He would see this through to the bitter end, with courage and a gnawing doubt that he was truly ready for what lay ahead. The trail led them deeper into the maze of the Badlands, a relentless journey under a sky that seemed to hold its breath. Days blurred into a weary rhythm of riding, searching, and the quiet camaraderie of two unlikely allies. Jedediah, with his cryptic wisdom and unexpected resilience, proved to be an invaluable guide, his knowledge of the hidden paths and forgotten outposts uncanny. They tracked Ramsey to a fortified canyon hideout, a grim fortress carved into the rock face. The final confrontation was swift and brutal. Caleb, his wounded arm aching, moved with a calculated ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. He wasn't just fighting for Silas's name anymore. He was fighting for every man who had been silenced, every truth that had been buried. The shootout was a maelstrom of gunfire and desperate shouts. Caleb fought with the ghost of Silas at his back, a silent, powerful presence. He faced Ramsey in a desperate, hand-to-hand struggle, the outlaw's strength immense, but Caleb's resolve unbreakable. In the end, it was the memory of Silas, the boy who promised adventure, the man who was framed, that gave Caleb the strength to prevail. Ramsey fell, and with him, the last vestiges of the lie that had haunted Caleb's life. When the dust settled and the silence descended once more, Caleb stood amidst the wreckage, exhausted but strangely at peace. He had done it. He had cleared Silas's name, not with words, but with blood and fire. But nothing was as it had been. The boy who had ridden out seeking to erase a stain had returned a man, scarred and hardened, but with a clarity of purpose he'd never known. The world, once a simple place of good and evil, now revealed its complex, shadowy underbelly. He stood with Jedediah on a high ridge overlooking the vast expanse of the plains, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Below them, the world stretched out, silent and indifferent. Caleb looked at his hands, calloused and worn, then up at the fading light. He had won, but victory felt less like triumph and more like a profound, quiet understanding. The shame was gone, replaced by a deep sorrow for what Silas had endured, and a fierce pride in the brother he had truly been. He thought of Silas, not as the coward they had branded him, but as the brave man who had stumbled upon a truth too dangerous to keep. Silas's saddle, now cleaned and carefully mended, sat beside him, no longer a symbol of abandonment, but a testament to a brother's unwavering loyalty. Caleb turned to Jedediah, a silent nod passing between them. The old man, his purpose fulfilled, would ride on, a guardian of forgotten truths. Caleb, too, would ride on, but his path was forever altered. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was a silent witness, a bearer of difficult truths. He looked out at the endless horizon, the stars beginning to prick through the twilight. The wind whispered through the tall grass, a mournful, reflective sigh. It carried no judgment, only the promise of an open road. And as Caleb swung himself back into his saddle, a quiet strength settled in his soul. "Some scars," he murmured to the fading light, his voice barely a whisper. "They don't heal. They just teach you how to ride the storm."